Heather from New York. Good evening.
Good evening. First of all, thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
And we just wanted to let you know we really appreciate these type of informative programs from people that are actually in the field doing every day. My children are very young, and they have a limited amount of experience with breeding swine and breeding sheep. And this will be our first year, basically, to get them competitive with market animals, both the lambs and the hogs. So a couple of questions that we have. As far as clipping the hair on a market hog, what is the basic guideline for when should we be clipping that hog before the show, about how far out, and how much hair do we leave? And then my question for the lambs is basically the same. When are we going to want to pull that wool off in order to make that skin look like it's going to really pop, you know, on show day? What is the general rule? How much, you know, how far in advance? And also, how do you make those lambs brace?
Okay. All right, everybody got your questions ready.
Yeah.
Let's
I guess
start.
I'll start with the pig since there was more lamb questions.
Yeah.
Regarding to that, I recommend to clip like 3 to 4 days prior to the show. A couple of different things, because when you do clip a pig, sometimes you'll get a little bit of scratches on them. They might fight you a little bit in terms of getting them clipped. That gives them a chance to calm down from those areas and heals from those certain wounds. And at the same time, after you clip a hog, if it doesn't quite look right, you get a chance to look at it for a couple days and find the spots that you did miss. We try to leave a little bit more hair on the hogs, almost an inch, less to 3/8 in terms of their hair coat, on their body, and on the head part of the areas where we clip them real tight. We use like a 10mm guard to clean those heads up and clean them up through their head and through their jowl region to make them look fresher and younger and more youthful. Then we leave more hair on the body, particularly nowadays, because the more hair there, it covers up the rib, because we don't want any rib showing. So to help answer her question, try to do that prior to the show, 3 or 4 days. You don't want to do it a week or 2 weeks because it loses the freshness. You want to bring the animal in as fresh as possible, but allow yourself a few days prior to doing that so you can see what you have.
And what about for the lambs?
Yeah, great question. I think very similarly to the way Ryan answered that, and doing the homework at home, we have to know what the skin's going to look like when it's shorn, so we do that maybe months prior to the show. If the lamb is a really good hided lamb, and when I mean that, tight and relatively thin skin, then we can use either a super surgical or a surgical blade. Lambs that tend to be a little coarser or thicker skinned, a fine, what's called a fine blade, is probably more optimal. But then, number of days before, a lamb that has a tendency to stress wrinkle when we shear it should probably be shorn about 3 days before. That's about the optimal amount of time when they kind of get over that stress effect in their skin after shearing and look their best. Some lambs look best being shorn right before they go into the ring, and those typically are the lambs that really are beautiful skin to begin with. So a lot of it deals with, you know, knowing the skin of the lamb and how it looks when it's shorn. And as far as the bracing question, genetics play a lot in a lamb's, you know, ability or acceptability of being braced. But we can do something if we practice on a raised platform, and I'm not talking about real high, but maybe a foot off the ground, and put that lamb's feet right on the edge and just get it to step off. That lamb will eventually plant its hind legs and resist being pushed off. And so it's not mean, it's not cruel, but those lambs do plant their hind legs. And then we just have to practice and have those lambs build up, like an athlete would, the ability to hold that position for a length of time.
That's a good point. In both pigs and lambs, I encourage exhibitors and their parents to look at the pigs and lambs as athletes and to train them like that, to build up the stamina so they'll perform in the show ring. Whether they're walking the whole time as a pig or whether they're being braced as a lamb, they're athletes, and they need to be fed and trained like them.
Right, and so it's not day of show. You don't walk in,
right.
that's right. You've got to be prepared.